Good morning from the United Kingdom. This is Ravi Nahar, and we haven't done this for a while. We haven't done a presentation on Zoom or YouTube for quite a long time, just because there's so much happening outside of Ramayana Decoded. However, there's a lot happening inside Ramayana Decoded, and a lot of people have messaged in to ask about the book that I am almost finished, and I am hoping to have that available to you at least electronically by November stroke December of this year. And then hopefully we'll get some hard copies made for anyone who wants a hard copy. Today's presentation has been a bit of something which was organized in less than 24 hours. Um, we do a radio program with Taresh and Rishabh at Radio Awaz FM based in Scotland, Glasgow. We were having some technical difficulties, but that's been resolved, and we're going to do those bi-monthly. So keep an eye out for those. Today, what I want to talk about is just very, very briefly, and if you have any questions, please just throw them in the chat box or feel free to just ask, which might be easier because I can't really see anything other than my slides. So today's presentation is on the Valmiki Ramayana, and I have titled this as Recoded because I realized over the last, well, maybe 7 to 8 years that I've been doing Ramayana Decoded that it's not something that can be decoded and explained in a very simple fashion to the vast majority of people. There are only very few people who have a burning interest and desire to learn about the ancient scriptures of ancient India, which are probably one of the most advanced scriptures in history, to understand those scriptures from a spiritual and scientific point of view, because they're not easy, and that's understandable. So what I'm going to try to do is go through the Ramayana very briefly and show you how we decode or recode the ancient scriptures. So why I say recode is because what I'm doing is bringing out the Valmiki Ramayana in a different light. So historically, it's always been considered as just a story. And some people have gone to the lengths of saying, well, it's just mythology. However, there's a lot of evidence that suggests otherwise, that actually these events did actually happen because there's evidence of them having have happened in ancient India, but also throughout other parts of the world. It can't just be a story because there are many different versions of this, and there are many different other races of people from different parts of the world who follow the Ramayana in their own ways. And although some of the details can be changed in between the beginning, the middle, and the end, what cannot be changed is the actual storyline and the actual events that happened at the beginning, that happened in the middle, and happened at the end. If you change all of those within any storyline, within a movie storyline, within a novel storyline, within any kind of storyline, what you do is you change the complete entire story. And this is why the rishis of ancient India, what they did was they took these very advanced spiritual formulas, spiritual understanding, and they classically, what they did was they split it into three types of understanding. Just as we have Brahma, the creator, who creates, we have Vishnu, the preserver, or who operates through creation and makes sure that it keeps going in a dharmic way. And then we have the Adi Atmic, which is ultimately the destruction of your physical self and the transformation into your spiritual self, the Shiva. So there are three levels of understanding, and those three levels of understanding are the physical, Adibhatik, the astral science, the Adidevic, and then underneath that is the Adi Atmic, or the disciplined practice of these advanced Kriya Yogic, or back in ancient India known as the Raja Yoga of ancient India, the royal science of God realization. So at the Adipathic level is the physical story. And as I explained, the story has a beginning, a middle, and the end. And those three parts cannot be changed. If those three parts are changed, you change the entire story. Certain details between those parts can be changed, and they have been changed in various different versions of the Ramayana. However, what never changes is the actual story. So if you read through the Valmiki Ramayana, there are lots and lots of things that Valmiki describes within the Ramayana, which the vast majority of people don't know about. So there's a lot of controversy, there's a lot of questions around, well, the Sita that was actually captured by Ravan was actually a Shaya Sita. It was a shadow of Sita. It wasn't the actual Sita. Now, in the Valmiki Ramayana, to my understanding, and those that within my very small group on WhatsApp, and those outside of that have said, well, actually, that's not in the Ramayana. However, there's a scientific or a Adidevic explanation that can be given to why that possibly could be. Let's not go into that today. Then there's other things in the Ramayana where when Ram, Lakshman, and Sita are going through their exile, when they come towards, I don't think they quite reach Panchavati yet, but when they're in the Dandaka forest, they come across a demon known as Virada. Now, a lot of people don't really talk about Virada, and Virada is a demon who captures Sita and runs off with her, but people won't talk about that because they don't know about it. And then also within the Ramayana, particularly within the Ariana Khanda, so in the Khanda where they're actually going through their 14 years of exile in the what we call the ancient India and the jungles of ancient India. They weren't quite jungles. They were going through landscapes which were highly advanced, but a lot of the races within ancient India back then were dwelling as advanced sentient beings, but living closely with nature. That doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't advanced, that they weren't technologically or spiritually advanced. They were so far advanced that actually they didn't need the kind of socio-economic environment that we have, in which the vast majority of people are locked into a system. They weren't locked into any system other than the system of creation, with flowing with the purpose of creation. So you could say they were living within like Ayurveda. And in the Ariana Kund, in that period when they meet Jatayu, this is still part of the storyline here, Valmiki talks about the whole of creation and how it was created, the three worlds, the spiritual, the astral, and the physical. And he goes through all the different energies, which are the Prajapatis and their offspring, as in the energies that they created and how they control different parts and different evolutions of creation in the spiritual, astral, and the physical world. So you can start beginning now to see that this was a very, very advanced scientific, spiritual piece of work, which cannot really be understood or even be really decoded to the level that we are trying to do it at, because the vast majority of people will have a difficulty in understanding the physical aspect of it or the astroscientific aspect of it, because a lot of this science is not quite in the mainstream yet. In mainstream education, it is at the forefront of scientific research, both within the East and the West, although a lot of the times the Western scientists seem to be credited by it. But there's a lot of um, scientific research which is happening both in India and outside of India, which actually suggests that these advanced, which I call advanced spiritual formulas, which are encoded into the Vedas, into the Ramayana by Valmiki, are actually spiritual formulas. And when you start breaking down those spiritual formulas, you come to this bit known as the Adidevic, the astral science, the scientific process. And this is a very vast science. It's huge. And you have to have a level of understanding and appetite to be able to go down and understand that. So, for example, one of the characters which I'm going to touch upon within the Ramayana is Hanuman. Hanuman is very well known all over the world in some shape or form by the vast majority of people. He has been brought into the Western world through Hollywood, where he has been mentioned in some movies. He's also within Asia, obviously within India, but basically Hanuman's everywhere. But what people don't understand is the name Hanuman is actually, if you could break it into two words, it's Hanu and Man, which means very, very basically, it means to kill the mind. And the whole entire science about the mind and the psychology of the mind and how the mind operates then goes into a very deep science. You can start talking about the brain, the different parts of the brain, consciousness. You can start talking about the pineal gland. You can start talking about how the heart, which is the heart or the heart chakra, the Anahata chakra, which symbolizes Hanuman, man, how that's actually connected to your brain through the vagus nerve. So now you start getting a flavor that actually this science is actually starting to get a lot deeper and starts to get a lot more at this time within our evolution can probably get a little bit confusing as well because we're still trying to understand. So Hanuman, man can be related to the heart. So, in the storyline, when Sita is captured by Ravan, and sorry, just before she's captured by Ravan, Ram goes off to catch the deer, Maricha. Maricha is known as a yaksha. Maricha is a yaksha that symbolizes what we call cosmic delusion. Because cosmic delusion and everything that you see around you is only actually a very small percentage of reality. And again, this is scientifically proven that actually we only interact with around 0.04% of the energy that's actually around us. We don't actually interact. Our senses don't allow us to interact with anything more than that. And there's a very good reason for that. And then there's something within your brain known as the default mode, which actually keeps you narrowed towards a single process or a single or a focus just on this cosmic delusion. Because if, for example, your consciousness was, let's say, accidentally expanded, you will actually come to realize that actually the past, present, and the future are all happening at the same time, and it becomes really confusing. It becomes very difficult for the mind to comprehend that unless you have gone through these techniques and evolved your brain and evolved your spine, which is very important. And again, I'll show you that in one of the slides. You've evolved your spine, you've evolved your brain to be able to comprehend and take that level of understanding. Now, it's also quoted by Albert Einstein that actually the only difference between the past, the present, and the future is an illusion, which is where this whole thing about Maricha comes in. So when Ram goes off to capture the golden deer, Maricha's disguised as the golden deer for Sita because she becomes attracted towards it. Maricha starts screaming out Lakshman's name. He starts screaming out Sita's name. He starts screaming out like that he's been hurt, but he's not been hurt. It is cosmic delusion that has been hurt. What then happens is that Sita then in the Valmiki Ramayana quotes as saying to Lakshman, "Go and find and protect your half brother." And she says that my life breath is not functioning properly, and neither is my heart. Now, Hanuman falls into all of that life, breath, and your heart, the Anahata chakra. And now we're going to go down to the atomic level of interpretation, where actually through the practice of Kriya Pranayam, you begin to synchronize your heart and your brain. Your heart has around, and this has been known for maybe 20 years plus, that your heart has these 40,000 neurons. So it has its own neural network, it has its own mini brain. However, that brain and the heart in the vast majority of people is usually out of synchronization. So you see a lot of pictures with chakras or the centers of consciousness along the spine of someone who's meditating, or a diagram or illustration of someone meditating, and they will always be aligned in a straight line, in a perfect straight line. In reality, the vast majority of people's centers of consciousness are actually not in alignment. They're scattered either to the left or the right. And there is a Russian scientist who is actually able to measure that, believe it or not. And he can take pictures of it. He can take pictures of your aura. He can take energy photos of your different centers of consciousness and then say, actually, you are going to have this physical ailment, or your mind is negative because of these reasons. And what was found was that people who actually did meditate and tried to bring their heart and their brain into synchronization, so Hanuman, pranayama, what happens was that their chakras or their centers of consciousness were also closely more aligned into a straight line. And that's what you're trying to achieve. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, I will take that as you know. So this here is the cause of creation, which I've got here, if you can see it. Aryan Khand, which is Canto 14, the Valmiki Ramayana. Now, Valmiki doesn't go into quite like this is a very simplistic version of the way he describes how creation evolves, and it is Jatayu who narrates to Ram and Lakshman how creation has evolved and the different cycles of creation. So I'll give you a few more seconds to have a look at that. So over here at the bottom left, we've got Narad or Om. Now there's a lot of people have said that, or a lot of people can tend to believe that, Narad came down in a physical form and narrated the Ramayana to Valmiki, and Valmiki sat there with a feather and he wrote the Ramayana on leaves. Now, I don't know how he wrote the Ramayana, but my understanding would be a very advanced civilization would have a more advanced way of writing down this very advanced spiritual knowledge, which has only up until that point has been passed from guru to disciple through Shruti, or through the fourth and the highest form of communication, which is para, telepathically. So in ancient India, nothing was ever written down. It was passed from the consciousness of the rishi or the guru to his disciples. And the reason why they used para, or the highest form of communication, telepathically, was because there is no loss of information. So again, this goes back to having your heart and your brain, particularly in this case, synchronized. And when that is synchronized and you are in synchronization with your students or your guru, you're then able to pass on information. Now, there's people will, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't happen. Well, it does, because there have been so many scientific incidences where people have said that before someone has passed away that they are very close to or they love, they've had this almost this sixth sense that something has gone wrong. That is a form of the highest form of communication. The the issue is with modern day man, we haven't yet developed that part of our evolution. It's a bit like if you take your mobile phones, we can all synchronize our phones. We can synchronize it to other phones. So, for example, if you're, and I'm all going to use this as an example because I have an iPhone. I have an iPhone. I have two iPhones. I actually have three iPhones. One for Ramayana Decoded, one for my personal stuff, and one for work. But those phones can all be synchronized together. So whatever I can do on one of my personal phones, that will automatically happen with no loss of information on the other iPhone. I can then connect that to iTunes. And again, there's no loss of information. It's very similar with human beings or advanced human beings of ancient India. That's what they did. So when we talk about Valmiki writing the Ramayana, what actually happens is that when your consciousness goes beyond the senses and beyond your physical body, and you become connected to a very deeper level of consciousness within creation at the Akashic level and even beyond the Akashic level, and there's only a rishi, a true rishi that is able to do that. What they do is they go in and they start writing the past, the present, and the future, because everything's happening at the same time. And Narad actually means the way and creation evolves from the original sound of Pranav. That's what that is. All the information is there. That's what Narad means. So that's why you would connect with that energy of Narad to be able to understand the Akashic records and then be able to, as Valmiki did, take all this advanced science, which are spiritual formulas and in Sanskrit, and then encode them in such a way that they are on three different levels: the causal, astral, and physical understanding. Any questions? Okay. So here I'd mentioned just earlier that the spine is really important, and the entire Ramayana is a bit like the whole land of India, where Ayodhya was at the top in the north, and Ayodhya is just over here, and that there, the brain is known as Kushal. That was the kingdom of Dasarath, and Ayodhya was the capital. Now, when you take away the A, what you have is Yod, which means to battle or to conflict. In Sanskrit, when you put an A or an A in front of a word, it means the opposite. So Ayodhya is equilibrium or balance. It was a place that was in complete equilibrium and balance with the purpose of creation. The ancient um, the ancient rishis, the illumined ancient rishis of ancient India, understood the purpose of creation and the purpose of life, because what they did was they started by understanding the source of creation first and then moved outwards. Whereas modern day man and modern day science, what happens is that we start with what we can physically see first and then we work backwards. And because we're working in that fashion, we come across a lot of barriers, and we come across it takes longer to do that. So for example, at the moment, from my understanding and my own research, is that science has yet to go beyond the Planck scale, which is the the deepest level that they have been able to go to into the structure of creation. What they know is that there is something beyond that, but they just don't know what it is at the moment, but they think it's information, like the Akashic records. And at the bottom, we have the Muladhara Chakra, or the Earth Chakra, Lanka. And this is where Ravan sits. Ravan, and I'm going to go through Ravan in a little bit more detail. Ravan sits over there because that is where all our energy, our life energy, which is flowing in through the Sahasra, which is not really a chakra, it can be described as the dynamo through which life energy flows from the astral world into the physical body, and then connects that energy to the 6 different chakras and all the nadis that then connect to those chakras. And there are 72,000 different types of nadis that connect to the chakras, the 6 chakras. And out of those, 3 are the most important. And in the Ramayana, Valmiki talks about it as Sumitra, Kakai, and Kushalya, the 3 queens of Dasarath, representing the 3 main nadis that connect into the physical body. And again, all these nadis, they all go out of balance when Ram, your soul, is exiled into the jungle of the nervous system, where your mind becomes confused because your senses, which are connected to the outside world through your physical body, become confused. And they become confused as a result of this thing known as chit, or feeling. So what happens is that when you have a feeling, or when you have chit, and feeling's a very simplistic way of describing chit, is that you then start to think for yourself that I am the creator because I've created this. Anything that you create cannot be wrong, and you become confused within this illusion. Any questions on that? Okay. So here's Dasarath. As I explained, Dasarath is the king of Kushal. Sorry about the picture. That's not a very good picture at all of Dasarath. There's not very many pictures I've come across of Dasarath online anywhere. However, dasarat means is a word which can be broken into two words, dasa and rata. Das means 10, and rata means chariot. And here we're talking about the five gyanendriyas, the five senses, and the five karmendriyas, the five actions which come from those senses. Now, when your mind is in ayodhya, it's in balance, your brain's in balance, your hormones are in balance. What happens is your dasarat is then operating from the human intellectual part of the brain and not from the emotional or the limbic part of the brain. The vast majority of people make decisions from the limbic part of the brain. And if there was a device that could measure where people were actually making their decisions from, I think that would help a lot of people to understand where they're actually making the decisions from, which part of their brain are they using to make the decisions that they're making, to formulate their opinions or their decisions on certain circumstances. And you will probably come to see that 99% of people will be making the decisions from the limbic part of their brain and not necessarily from the human or the frontal lobe part of the brain. Now, in the Vedas, the rishis describe this as buddhi, which is spiritual intelligence. It's not logical intelligence, it's spiritual intelligence. And then there is manas, or the blind mind. So there's two sides to the spectrum, and the vast majority of people will sit somewhere in between those. Now, in order for dharma, in order for the purpose of creation, you have to be well balanced with both. So that's Dasarat. And then on the opposite side, as I had shown in my diagram of Ayodhya and Lanka, Ravan or Dasana, he sits at the bottom, Lankeshwar, the king of Lanka, the king of the earth chakra at the bottom. And he represents the negative or the tamas aspect of the Muladhara chakra. And again, the sana is 10, but here your five Gyanendriyas and your five Karmendriyas are operating under manas or the blind mind. So it's operating in this 0.04% of Maya. In the Valmiki Ramayana, when Ram, Lakshman, and Sita meet Agastya, he meditates and he tells them to go to Panchavati. Panchavati means five. So I'll let you put that together yourself, why it's five. Five Jnanendriyas, five Karmendriyas. And he says to Ram that he knows of his father's story, he knows of his story, he can see the future, the present, and the past, and he understands his purpose. And he advises Ram to go to Panchavati with Sita and Lakshman. And he says, over there you will rejoice. It's a place where Sita can live, and it's very nice. There's a lot of harmony. There's a lot of things there that you will like in the last couple of years of your exile, where you can spend over there. But the question is that if Agastya, who is so advanced, why did he tell them to go over there? Well, this is all very symbolic. And the reason why we go into Panchavati is because we come into this illusion over here that they're currently operating within, this, you could call this matrix. And this matrix has lots of lovely things to offer us. It has lots of very nice things. It has luxurious things to offer us that we fall into the trap of. And we tend to believe that that is life, that this is all it can be. We look at these superstars, sports stars, actors, actresses, nowadays motivational speakers who have all these great luxurious things, and we tend to believe that this must be life, but that's not life. And this is what happens when Ram, Lakshmana, and Sita go to Panchavati, that actually that's when the real problems start happening. That is when Sita is captured by Ravan. And this all happens as a result of moving into the lower part of the chakras. So when you look at the spine, and I said there are six chakras, you have the three at the top, and then you have three at the bottom. And the Manipur chakra is right in the middle. So the Manipura chakra is round about the place where you could say that Panchavati was. And what happens is in the Manipur chakra, there is a door. There is a door known as the that goes into the Brahmanadi. Now, they were talking about this from the Adi-atmic level of interpretation and the Adi-devic level of interpretation. So I'll go back to this slide here. The Manipur chakras somewhere about over here, and over here there's a door. So the three chakras over here, as Agna, Vishuddhi, Anahata, Manipur, and then you go down to Savastidhan and Muladhara. And the Manipur chakra over here, somewhere around here or over here, is where there is a door known as the door of that takes you into the Brahmanari. And the Brahmanari was something that even Swami Vivekananda was talking about over 100 years ago when he was in the US doing his presentations in Harvard University. So what happens is these three chakras are known as the higher level of consciousness. So Vishuddhi, Anahata, Manipur, and you have a positive over here at the Agna, and you have a negative over here at Muladhara. When you raise your consciousness to higher levels of consciousness, you operate just in the top part. You operate between Manipur and the Agna. So the Agna stays positive and the Manipura becomes negative. And this part over here, you've what we say you conquered because your Kundalini has risen up to the Manipur. However, in the vast majority of people, we're operating between the Manipur and the Muladhara. And this is what happens when your soul, Ram, your power of concentration or focus, Lakshman, and your Kundalini, Sita, come under the influence of the lower centers of consciousness. The Kundalini gets captured, held captive in Lanka, because what happens is that all the energy then flows outwards into the world of Maya, into the world of delusion. Maricha represents this delusion. Your Kundalini becomes attracted to the delusion. There's this natural magnetism for it. And then that is when the ego captures it. And then when you try to then raise this consciousness, raise this Kundalini up, as soon as you sit down to meditate, your mind starts to go all over the place because you're going into deeper levels of subconsciousness and you have hundreds, maybe not even hundreds, you've got billions of bits of information in your subconscious mind, which you're not aware of. This is why I mentioned the default mode. The default mode keeps you locked into this delusion in a very narrow kind of way. However, your senses are still taking information from all around you, and that information is going somewhere. But only enough information is given to you to be able to operate within this delusion, to keep you going, because the purpose of creation, the purpose of Maya, is to keep going. If every single person on this planet at the same time went into samadhi, this probably wouldn't exist. This illusion won't exist anymore. And this is what happens in certain parts of the world, and in ancient times as well, where certain races were so advanced that actually the outside world didn't really exist for them because they were more connected to this inside world. Does anybody have any questions? I know that I've done quite a lot of talking. Okay, so I've been over this slide right at the beginning around Hanuman, how it means pranayama, represents the Anahata chakra, it's the heart-brain synchronization, the Kriya pranayama, brings the mind back under some level of control and leads the soul, Rama consciousness, into Manosarovar. So Hanuman was a very big character within the story of the Ramayana. Without Hanuman, Ram probably was not able to really win back, win the war against Ravan and bring Sita back. And the reason why that wouldn't have happened was because Hanuman wasn't there. And even when you're practicing Kriya Pranayama is the key to victory for your consciousness, because without that, you can't. And I was explaining this to someone last week, I think it was, that actually the reason why we can't comprehend this very advanced science because it's so simple. When you have a very complex problem, you need a very simple answer. And the answer is the breath. The first act of life is the breath. The last act of life is the breath. Therefore, the breath must have something to do with everything that you do in between. Like I said, the beginning, the middle, and the end cannot be changed. You can't change the fact that you need breath to come into this delusion. And you can't change the fact that the last thing that happens is your breath. Your last act of life is your breath before you go on and go wherever it is that you're going to on the other side. So the breath must have something to do with it, but the breath is such a subtle science, but so advanced at the same time that it's difficult for your mind to attach. So like I said not long ago, that if we could measure from which part of the brain people are making decisions from, then the mind has something to attach. Say, oh yeah, actually, I didn't know that. Bloody hell, I've been making decisions from the limbic part of the brain. I've been making too many emotional decisions. Perhaps that's the reason why my life has been the way it has been. But now I have an opportunity to change it because I can see it. But the problem is that we don't have that. We've never really had anything like that. And the mind finds it difficult to attach something to nothing it has ever experienced because it's such a subtle science. And that's why practicing meditation or practicing concentration is so important, because what you start doing is you start developing certain parts of your brain. And again, we can't see what parts of the brain you're developing. What you can only really see is the result. So there are research scientists out there that have done studies on meditation, but the way they show their results is through creativity and how sharp someone's brain becomes, and actually how well synchronized they are with their heart and with the results that they produce as a result, either spiritually or materially. There is now some level of research and findings that actually also shows how certain parts of your brain actually start changing, irrespective of your age. So it's always been commonly accepted that the older you get, you somehow become dumber for some reason. But actually, what's been found is that with these meditative research studies, that actually your brain, that doesn't happen. If you continue to meditate through your life and live a well-balanced and healthy lifestyle, actually your brain can become a lot more developed than someone who's perhaps 40 years younger than you. So that's the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?